My name's Andrew Staples, and I am the Student Success Coach with International Student Services, and I'll be reviewing the content of the presentation with you today. So today's session is all about Hamilton. Hamilton is going to be your home for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe more years. And so we want to just give you a general overview of the city, what to expect for those of you who have never lived in Hamilton before. We are also touching a little bit on just generally life in Ontario and Canada as well. So this webinar really is for individuals who are new to Hamilton as well as new to Canada. To begin this webinar, we want to do a land acknowledgement. A land acknowledgement is something that you will see throughout your time in Canada. And this is something that occurs at the beginning of meetings or workshops as a way of remembering and reconciling the Indigenous people that inhabited the land before colonization and who continue to inhabit the land. So McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. So we're dividing the session into 3 sections. So the first is going to be generally things to do in Hamilton. We're then going to talk about transportation, banking, and opening phone. And then we are going to talk about some cultural norms as well as the climate. So to start, we're going to talk about things to do in the city of Hamilton. So Hamilton itself is considered a mid-sized city in Canada. However, I recognize, depending on where you're joining us from, a population of 580,000, you might view it as quite a small city or maybe a very large city. But in Canada, Hamilton would be considered a mid-sized city. It's located between Toronto and Niagara Falls. It's about an hour drive each way to either of those destinations. Currently, Hamilton's known for a thriving art scene, lots of great restaurants popping up. We also are, even though we are a city, we're surrounded by nature, and we have a lot of nature throughout the city that we're going to touch on a little bit later. Now, as McMaster students, it's important to know that there are other post-secondary institutions within Hamilton. So there's also Mohawk College and Redeemer University College. So Hamilton has a lot of nature, and one thing that makes the city quite unique is that we actually have over 100 waterfalls throughout the city. And these are great. You can go on little hikes too, walks. Some are accessible by public transit, and they're really great all 4 seasons. So going in the summer, seeing the water flowing, but they're also great to check out in the winter to see frozen waterfalls. And why do we have so many waterfalls? Well, that's because in Hamilton, we have what's called a mountain, or at least Hamiltonians call it a mountain. As you can see in this photo, that is our mountain. It's actually not really a traditional mountain. It's what we call an escarpment. And so the escarpment's about 100 meters tall in parts, maybe a little bit taller, a little bit shorter. And so the city is actually divided into kind of 2 sections. So we have the lower city, and then we have the mountain, which would be sort of the upper city. And so there are obviously roads that connect us, but there's also a lot of stairs, and these stairs are, again, great for hiking or a great place to exercise. And so when you get here and, you're saying, where's this restaurant, or where do you live? And if someone says, I live up on the mountain, this is what they're talking about. And so Hamilton is quite a diverse city, and with that diversity, it brings a lot of great food options to you. So, potentially depending on where you're coming from, you might still be able to find similar food as home. And so there are lots of great restaurants close to campus as well as scattered throughout the city. And often people think, what is Canadian food? What is normal to eat in Canada? And because Canada is so diverse, this is all, examples of what Canadians eat. And so oftentimes when you're going out for food with people, instead of saying, what are you interested in? People often will describe a nation or a culture in terms of what type of food that they're interested in eating. One Canadian food that we do have listed on the screen is the sort of lower right picture, which is a picture of French fries. There's gravy on top and then cheese on top of that. This is something from the French-speaking part of Canada, which is the province of Quebec. And this is called poutine. So I highly recommend at some point you try poutine. It's really delicious. It's very heavy. But again, this is one example of like a truly Canadian type of meal. We also want to highlight some sort of fun places that you can check out or places of interest for students. So Lock Street is an area about maybe a 10-minute bus ride, 7-minute bus ride from campus. And there's a lot of coffee shops, restaurants. It's a nice place to go for a little stroll and hang out with your friends. If you go a little bit further away from Lock Street, again, probably a 10-15-minute ride from campus, bus ride from campus to downtown Hamilton. This is where you're going to see a lot more shopping opportunities, restaurants, nightlife. There's also some great multicultural restaurants and grocery store chains in downtown Hamilton. There's also the Hamilton Farmers Market, which is located in, it's called Jackson Square. That is the sort of downtown mall. So in Hamilton, there are several malls, but Jackson Square would be the closest to campus. We also have an art gallery, which really encourage you to go and check out sometime. Another place which is close to campus is called University Plaza. Might not necessarily be a fun place to go hang out, but it's really popular just to go shopping. They sort of have a little bit of everything that you can go there and access. And then, as I mentioned before, Hamilton has lots of nature and parks. And so Bayfront Park is just one of them. It's located down at the Hamilton waterfront. So in addition to all the waterfalls that we have in Hamilton, we also have, so we're part of Hamilton borders Lake Ontario. And then we also have a harbor, which is called Hamilton Harbor or Burlington Bay. We share it with a neighboring city. And so there's great bike paths down there, opportunities to ice skate in the winter. Again, there's a lot of really interesting things to see in the city. And we do encourage you to, leave campus, leave the area that you're living, go out with some friends and explore your surroundings. Grocery stores that are located near campus, there are a few that we wanted to highlight. So for those of you who are living in what we call the Westdale area, which is sort of the immediate vicinity around McMaster, Food Basics is located there. Fortino's is located in the Ainsleywood neighborhood. And again, if you're living off campus, you might be familiar with these terms, Westdale and Ainsleywood. Both of these options are quite close to campus and quite close to where you live, very easily accessible by bus. And both of these grocery stores actually have discounts for students on Tuesdays. So if you go to Food Basics or Fortino's on a Tuesday, you will get 10% off your grocery bill, which is really great. So I would encourage you from an economical perspective, when you're going grocery shopping, to try to arrange it for a Tuesday. We also wanted to highlight Nations, which is a grocery store located downtown in Jackson Square Mall. And Nations has a lot of multicultural food. It's easily accessible by bus. And again, we just wanted to share that there are a variety of options available to you. So the next section we wanted to talk about is about getting around the city, as well as we know a lot of students have questions about how do I open a bank account? How do I set up a phone? So we wanted to cover those with you. So getting around in Hamilton is quite easy if you don't have a car. It's important to just sort of pause and recognize that a lot of Canadian cities and a lot of North American cities are designed with a car in mind. That's not to say you have to have a car, but it is just keeping in mind that um, things aren't necessarily very densely populated and things are spread out. But thankfully, Hamilton has a really great bus system, which is called HSR. HSR stands for the Hamilton Street Railway. We used to have a railway. We currently do not. So they've kept the name, but it is just a bus system. And so McMaster is sort of like a transit hub. There are lots of buses coming and going, and you can easily hop on a bus from campus or from where you live to get to campus, as well as to explore the rest of the city. One great program that exists in Hamilton is called SOBI, which is the Hamilton Bike Share Program. So this is something you can pay by a monthly membership, or you could pay per ride. And they've got these bikes that are tuned up, ready for you to go. And they've got these drop-off stations throughout the city. So it's really convenient. It's a really great way to get around, get a little bit of exercise if you just want to sort of explore the city by bike. The next thing we want to share is called Go Transit. And so Go Transit is the intercity transit company within Ontario. So if you're in Hamilton and you want to go somewhere in Hamilton, you would take HSR. But if you wanted to go to Toronto for the day, or maybe you've got want to go to Mississauga or Oakville or another neighboring city, that's when you would take Go Transit. And so there are both buses and trains. McMaster does have a Go Transit bus hub on campus as well, so it is quite convenient. There's also a lot of Go buses as well as Go trains that leave downtown Hamilton. And of course, we do have rideshare companies such as Uber and Lyft that are available, as well as taxi companies within Hamilton. So there are lots of ways for you to get around. One thing that you'll probably become familiar with is what's called a Presto card. And so a Presto card is looks kind of like a credit card, and it is to make to make payments as well as to use public transit within Ontario. So HSR and Hamilton uses it, as well as Go Transit uses it. And the nice thing about Presto is that, let's say you were going from Hamilton to Toronto and then taking a bus or a subway in Toronto, you can actually use the same card. And they actually have discounts and transfer discounts, if you're going from Go Bus to a Toronto Transit or something like that. And so as McMaster students, most McMaster students who are full-time do pay for an HSR bus pass within your tuition. And so that means for most of you who are paying into this, you will have, that there's a few steps you need to take. It's quite easy to do, but you will be loading your HSR bus pass onto your Presto account. And that way you can use your Presto account or your Presto card anywhere within the city of Hamilton for unlimited rides. Now, if you then wanted to use the Presto card to go to Toronto or to go to another city on Go Transit, you can't use that HSR bus pass because that's only for Hamilton, in which case you would then be loading money onto your Presto card and then tapping on to the train or the bus to pay for that. However, the great thing is McMaster students do get a discount on Go Transit, so you wouldn't be paying full fare. When you get to Canada, or maybe even before, you might want to get out some Canadian cash. One thing that might be unique depending on where you're coming from is that our money is actually made of plastic. We used to have paper money, but it's been phased out. And now all of our bills are actually plastic. It's great because they're washable. You can't really rip them, so they last a lot longer. But do recognize that this might be something new, again, depending on where you are joining us from. And so we do have coins as well that you can see in different denominations. However, our prices do go down to the nearest 1 cent. But if you're paying in cash, the smallest denomination coin is 5 cents. So if you are paying cash for something and you can't pay that exact cent. So, for example, if you go and buy a notebook and you're paying cash and the notebook price is $10.23, the 23 would actually be rounded up and you would be paying $10.25. If the notebook was $10.22, that amount would be rounded down, so you pay $10.20. This is only if you're paying cash. If you are paying with electronic payments, so debit, credit, Apple Pay, anything like that, then you would be paying the exact amount, the $10.23. So most students, when they come, they do decide to open a bank account. This is great because if you're sending money from home, you can send it in a large amount to your Canadian bank, and then you don't have to pay the transfer fees every time you need more money, that the money is secured in your bank in Canada. All banks in Canada are regulated, they're insured. There's really not a right or wrong bank choice. So when it comes to selecting a bank, you just want to find a bank that caters to your specific needs. And so as students, what you would want to look out for is a bank that has great student accounts. And so looking for something that has no or very limited fees, as well as a bank that might have unlimited or a lot of monthly transactions. So it's quite common in Canada when you open a non-student account to have a monthly fee that you need to pay, as well as you might only have 15 free debit transactions per month. However, as a student, there are incentives to join these banks, as so they do have great deals as under student accounts. And also keep in mind, the first bank that you open doesn't mean you have to stick with them forever. You can always switch later on. There's or open a second bank account. You have that flexibility. And so to actually open a bank account in Canada, what you would need to do is have 1 to 2 pieces of identification. And so as international students, your best piece of identification would be your passport. And then as well as bring your study permit as well and your letter of acceptance. And so those 2 documents would then be proof that you are a student to get that student account open. In Canada, if you are taking out cash, there are potentially fees to use an ATM or a bank machine. So typically, if you're using a bank machine of your own bank, there is no fees to take out cash. But if you are using your debit card and go to another bank and use their bank machine to take out cash, there will often be a service charge. And so we just are telling you this just so you are aware. So when you are searching for a bank, if you're someone that's going to be taking out a lot of cash, you'd want to look for, is there a bank machine close to where you live? Is it easily accessible to take out cash so you don't have to pay those additional fees each time you need cash? And so again, it's totally up to you which bank you choose from. I would suggest maybe take a picture of this screen. So you can see this is really just by proximity to campus. So CIBC, Scotiabank, TD, and Pace Credit Union, they are all located in Westdale, which is within walking distance of campus. There's an RBC Bank on campus in the athletic center, and PC Financial is a bank that is located in Fortinos, which we talked about earlier. So Fortinos is a grocery store nearby. And so when it comes to setting up a phone, there's a couple of things to be aware of. In Canada, when you purchase a phone, typically you buy it and it is locked to a specific carrier or a specific company for the duration of your contract, which is typically 2 years. And so if you're coming here and you're looking to buy a new phone, that's okay. You're able to do that. But just keep in mind that generally you're locked in on that contract for usually it's 2 years. If you are bringing your own phone, there are a couple of options. So you can pay monthly, or you could sign up for a longer term contract. But usually if you're bringing your own phone, you would be setting something up that's either prepaid, where you pay in advance, or you set it up where you just get billed each month. And so keep in mind, depending on where you're coming from, if your phone is in Canada, what we say is if your phone is locked, meaning it is exclusive to one carrier, what you would want to do is ensure that your phone is unlocked prior to coming to Canada. That way, when you get here, you can pick and choose any of the phone carriers and providers that you would like to go with. Again, this is just a list of phone providers near campus. It's totally up to you. I would suggest go to their websites, find out what plan works best for you, and as well as convenience in terms of proximity to campus. I do want to warn you that phone plans are quite expensive in Canada compared to most of the world. I think we have the second highest rates in the entire world when it comes to phone plans. So the largest distinguishing factor in price is often the amount of data you have, so the amount of megabytes or gigabytes you use per month. And so keep in mind that campus has Wi-Fi everywhere that you as students would have access to. Where you're living, you're most likely going to have internet set up and Wi-Fi. Most restaurants and coffee shops also do. And so if you're looking for a way to save a little bit of money, maybe get a plan or set it up so you have a smaller amount of data. And then, if you need more, you could always adjust your plan and increase that amount of data. But sometimes if you sign a contract with a lot of data, it's harder to then decrease later on because you've committed to that certain financial price per month. And the last thing we wanted to talk about are some cultural norms, as well as the climate, because we recognize, depending on where you're joining us from, coming to Canada, Canada has a reputation of being quite a cold environment, which is true, but we're also a very hot environment. We've got very distinct seasons. So most people would consider Canada to be cold, or winter time from November until March. However, we do have really, really hot summers. So daytime temperatures can go up to 35 degrees. We have a very humid climate. So the temperature might be 30 degrees, but it might actually feel like 40 or even higher. So that can come as a surprise to people because I think when people think of Canada, they often think of snow. But when you arrive in August and September, it is going to be very, very warm. In the winter, it does get cold. It can get as low as minus 25 some days. And then in Canada, when we measure the cold temperature, we have something called the wind chill. And so the wind chill is not the true temperature. So if the true temperature outside is minus 10, but is really, really windy, the wind chill might say it feels like -15 or -20. And so that's, when you're in the wind and that cold wind is blowing on you, it actually feels colder than the -10 degrees. We do have lots of snow throughout the winter, and it's just important, to be mindful that sidewalks and roads can be icy. However, campus is always cleared. We have great facility services that make sure, the walkways, staircases are clear of snow, and it's easy to navigate. Outside of campus, homeowners are responsible for shoveling and clearing snow. Um, some do it better than others. So again, it's just to be mindful of when you're walking in those first few snowfalls that it can be icy around. And so one common question that we're asked is about bringing warm clothes for winter. And so this really depends on where you're coming from. If you're coming from a climate that is similar to Canada and you've got similar temperatures and you already have suitable winter clothes, absolutely bring that with you. But if you are coming from a more warmer climate or a tropical place, the clothes that you buy there that would be deemed as winter clothes might not be suitable for a Canadian winter. And so what we'd encourage you to do is, if you're coming from a warmer climate, maybe wait until you get here, and then you can purchase the appropriate clothing that is sold here, because anything that's sold here is sold for um, the Canadian winter climate. And also just be aware you do not have to go out and spend huge amounts of money on designer luxury brands. Clothes that you buy here that are more economical and reasonably priced will keep you warm. And it's also, as sort of a general advice, to dress in layers. So as you can see in this picture here, the top picture has two people who are walking in the winter. So we'll start from the bottom. They've got appropriate footwear, so boots, so they're not slipping. It looks like they're just wearing pants, which is quite common. When it's really, really cold, if you're spending a lot of time outside, some people might wear snow pants, but just, going from your house to campus, most people just wear regular pants. However, some people do have what we call long underwear on underneath, just as sort of an extra layer. Both individuals have winter jackets. And then you can kind of see under their jackets, they have layers. So looks like they have a hooded sweatshirt. Probably under that, they might have another sweatshirt. And then they have, mitts to keep their hands warm, a scarf to keep their neck warm, and a hat, which in Canada, we call winter hats toques. It's kind of a funny word, toque, that is a uniquely Canadian term. And so we always dress in layers because, when you're going from, let's say the bus to your classroom, once you get in the classroom, it's going to be really, really warm. So you want to peel off some of those layers so you are comfortable. For comparison, this is also another picture of campus in the summer. And so as you can see, people are wearing clothes that are weather appropriate. And so based on some of the conversations we've had and some of the things new students have shared with us, we wanted to maybe help prepare you a little bit with some of the norms that might surprise you. And so quite a few students say that life in Canada, life in Hamilton can feel really slow and quiet. And that's because a lot of the stores close at 5 p.m., which can be quite early to some people. Maybe on a Friday, things will be open a little bit later for shopping. But often, independent stores will be closing at 5. Grocery stores, shopping malls, they're usually open until 9 p.m., maybe 10 p.m. But generally, everything is shut down quite early, again, depending on where you're joining us from. McMaster campus, as well as the city of Hamilton, is a very diverse and multicultural environment, which is really great. It's a great opportunity to be exposed to other cultures, to meet people from different parts of the world. But we also recognize that our multiculturalism also is people that live in Canada and were born in Canada. In Hamilton, about 25% of the population um, was not actually born in Canada. So we have a lot of people coming, we have students, but we also have people coming to immigrate to Canada as well. So there is a lot of diversity and multiculturalism throughout not only campus, not only Hamilton, but all of Canada. And so, as I mentioned before, cities really are sometimes designed for cars. And so you might go to a place that would be deemed like a shopping center. And sometimes a shopping center really is designed, um, to drive between one store and another. So a bus might take you, drop you off, and you still might have to do a lot of walking outdoors from store to store. We do have indoor shopping malls, absolutely, but there are quite a few of these sort of outdoor shopping centers that are designed for cars. Um, Canadians also generally like to host people in their homes. And so this could be for dinner or just having friends over. Um, so it's very common that, if you and a friend are just going to hang out or do something, to invite them to your house as opposed to going out for dinner or going out for coffee. We do still go out and about, but eating out can be quite expensive. Um, so a lot of people do like to host dinners and bring people into their homes. Canada also has lots and lots of animals, and this is true even within the city. So sometimes in the evenings, it's very common to see deer actually on campus wandering around. Raccoons, you will probably see at nighttime almost everywhere in the city. They are very cute to look at. They do eat garbage and go through our trash bin, so they can be a bit of a nuisance sometimes and make a mess. Skunks are also quite common in the city. Again, nice to look at. You don't want to get too close or they might spray you and you're going to smell quite badly for a while. So keep your distance from skunks. Geese or the Canada goose, they are everywhere. They're quite territorial animals and they often do not move out of the way for humans. And so they can be quite aggressive, especially in the springtime as they have their young babies. So again, it's common to see geese around campus in fields, but don't get too close because they will attack and they can be very aggressive. And lastly, squirrels. You will see squirrels absolutely everywhere, up trees, running around campus. That they just kind of do their thing. They don't get very close to people, but it is really nice to go for a hike and be able to be exposed to all of this wildlife. Hamilton, we don't have any dangerous wildlife per se. So things like bears, they're usually in more northern parts. So, a few hour drives north of Hamilton. Cougars, coyotes, we do have, but not so common in the city. We have foxes as well. That there's a lot of wildlife, but generally the wildlife within the city is quite safe. We don't have any poisonous snakes or spiders. Um, so yeah, generally it's the animals are safe, but again, keep your distance because it is wildlife and we don't want you to harm them or get harmed. Another thing that is quite surprising for people is tax and tipping. So in Canada, tax is not included in the price that you see. So if you go to a store and you see a t-shirt you like and the t-shirt is $20, you are going to be paying more than $20 because you need to pay tax on top of that. And so tax is 13%, and this is added at the checkout when you are paying. Taxes added to almost everything with the exception of food. So when you go grocery shopping, there typically is not tax added. The only exception to that would be prepared food. So if you're going to a grocery store and buying something from like the hot deli counter, you may be paying tax on that. As well as at restaurants, you'd be paying tax. Tipping is another thing that is expected when eating out. And when you're dealing with sort of service industry related positions. So if you go out, so this is an example of the picture on screen is a receipt from dinner. So, if you go out, you can see here the total is $50. You're then paying tax on top of that. And then you are expected to tip the staff. It is, for restaurants, it is expected, and anytime that you are being served at your table. It is common but optional for food delivery, haircuts. If you're going to like a coffee shop, they might have a tip jar. Again, it's very common, but it is optional. Generally, what people tip is anywhere between 10 and 20%. I think 15% is quite common. But again, this is just something to be aware of because I do recognize that it is quite unique to North American culture. So a few points to sort of close off this session. Remember, when you get here, you're going to be exposed to a lot of new things, new people, new experiences. It's probably going to be very exciting at first, might be a little bit overwhelming, but give yourself a lot of time to adapt to life in Hamilton. It can take 6 months, it could take a year. And there's going to be ups and downs throughout this. You're probably going to experience homesickness. You're probably going to question, why do they do it this way? It's so strange. It's different from the way I do it. But give yourself time to go through that process of adjusting. And so there are individuals that you can connect with to get help. So for undergraduate students, there's the ISS Buddy program, which is a peer-to-peer support program where you'd be paired with upper year international students. Likewise, for graduate students, there's the Graduate Navigator program. Same idea, but you'd be paired with an upper year graduate student. Also talk about what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. Talk to friends, talk to roommates. International Student Services, we have a lot of socials for international students. We really encourage students to, share how you're feeling. You can laugh about things. You can share your frustration about some of these differences that you're experiencing. My role as a student success coach is also to help you adapt. So if you're going through something and you're not sure who to talk to, reach out to me and I'm happy to, sort of help guide you through this process. We also have the Student Wellness Center for those who are experiencing, maybe more intense feelings of homesickness or sadness or loneliness. The Student Wellness Center is available to help you. We encourage you to keep in touch with your friends and family back home. And of course, come out to our events, meet other international students, because this is a journey that you're all on when you're living in a new place. As international students, you are protected under the same laws that protect Canadians and permanent residents that are here. And so there are laws to protect you against discrimination. It's important for you to recognize that you are protected, but it also means that other people are protected. So this whole idea is to promote equity and inclusion. The campus is a safe environment for everybody, and you're respecting people and really open to everybody's ideas and views. We do have an office dedicated to supporting this, which is the Equity and Inclusion Office. And so if you have any concerns about how you're being treated, you can always reach out to them to talk about some supports that might be available to you. I'm recording this right now in June. And so June in Canada is Pride Month. And so, in Canada, we really recognize and value the importance of respecting people's gender identity and their expression of gender. And so on campus, there's the Pride Community Center, which is run through the McMaster Student Union, as well as the Women and Gender Equity Network. Just some general health and safety tips for you. In Canada, you do need to be 19 years of age or older to consume alcohol, tobacco, or cannabis. And you cannot have any open alcohol in any public spaces. So, if you wanted to go for a little picnic with some friends and maybe bring a bottle of wine to have with your picnic, you cannot do that in Canada. You cannot have open alcohol anywhere really outside in a public space, and obviously not in a vehicle either. Canada also has very strict no smoking rules. And so there's no smoking really anywhere indoors in any public space. And on campus, there's actually no smoking anywhere on campus, indoors or outdoors. So even if you did need to smoke, you actually have to physically leave the campus property to smoke. So we do recognize that for some of you, being exposed to alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis might be something new that you've never participated in. And so we do want to make sure that if you are consuming any of those substances, that you're doing so responsibly and that you are aware of the consequences. And so our wellness center does have a lot of great resources if you are looking for a bit more information about them. Unfortunately, in Ontario, there are a lot of scams and frauds that go on. This is probably most common through phone or text messages. And so people who live in Canada and are used to it, it's very easy for us to identify what is a legitimate phone call, what is a fake phone call, or people trying to get money from you or your personal information. And so we do have a workshop in September that's going to be dedicated to this. Would really recommend that you attend. But please just keep in mind, if you ever get a phone call or an email of somebody saying, we're the police, you need to follow up with us, or we're Canada Revenue Agency about your taxes, or maybe even identifying as an embassy from your home country, please let us know and talk to us before you proceed with forwarding them back or giving them any information. Most likely they are fake and they are trying to get information from you. They're not necessarily targeting you because you're an international student. They're targeting everybody, but you might be more susceptible to it because you're not familiar that these are scams. And so again, not saying this to scare you, but we want to ensure that you are safe and you are not falling victim to them. If you are ever in an emergency while in Canada, we wanted to just make sure you're aware that from any phone, if you call 911, just like in the movies or in the TV shows, you call 911 and that will connect you with Hamilton Fire, Police, or an ambulance. This is only to be used in like a true emergency. For non-emergencies, if you need to get in touch with a doctor or medical staff, we actually have a webinar dedicated to the Ontario healthcare system coming up in August. So I'd recommend that you register for that. One thing I want to share with you is about the Ontario photo card. So as talked about previously, you do need to be 19 years of age in order to consume alcohol, tobacco, or cannabis. And so if you went to a restaurant and wanted a drink to go with your meal, you might be ID'd and asked to show proof that you are 19 years of age or older. And this really happens. Even people in their 30s, even 40s might be ID'd because it is taken very, very seriously. And so what that means is that you do have to have a government recognized identification. And so you could certainly use your passport. However, we do know that your passport's a very valuable document and you might not want to be carrying it around with you all the time. So one alternative could be to apply for what's called the Ontario Photo Card. It's an identification card. It would have your photo, your street address, your birth date, and you can use this anywhere as proof of who you are as well as your age. There is a cost to it, which is $35, and you can apply at a Service Ontario location.